Welcome, Jason.
Morning. Thank you, Asaf.
Yeah, we're at our offices. It's a pleasure to have you. You had a good week in Israel, no?
Yes, amazing week. It's an amazing city. It's a little bit hot, but it was great to be around so many, amazing technologists. So yeah.
I'm very curious. You spent substantial time at Netflix. Did you see any content before everyone else saw it?
We did, yeah. It was funny. We ended up rolling out what we would call content preview, and theoretically it was a benefit for employees to be able to see content early, but really it was kind of like a quality control because a lot of content in production gets released very, very last minute. So we were meant to catch any errors and subtitles and things like that.
So you were actually lucky you saw stuff that no one else saw.
Yeah, we got to see it early. Of course, you had to keep it quiet, no spoilers.
Yeah. Super. The world is, we're talking about the Mark Andreessen quote about software eating the world, and nowadays cloud is basically, cloud and data are eating the world, and it seemed to me that most of the cyber security industry and most of the innovation are happening on the cloud.
Correct. Agreed.
And it's kind of a vicious cycle for entities who are not yet on the cloud, because you get tremendous innovation, you get great technology, and people, smart people who are in the industry, they want to be in the edge of technology. So the workforce, kind of the A people workforce, the high quality people, they kind of transform to entities who move to the cloud, who reside there. They can enjoy tremendous technology, tremendous innovation. Netflix was one of the pioneers moving to the cloud. I'd like to hear your kind of insights about this journey and specifically security, because you didn't have any precedents to look at. You kind of wrote history.
Yeah, it was a great time at Netflix. I would say we started right around 2008, and that was quite early for especially larger companies journeying to the public cloud, because Netflix was actually started in 1997, so it was quite a established company. But what many folks know, don't know, especially outside of the U.S., is that Netflix started as a DVD by mail service. So you would go to a website, you would choose a DVD, and then we would send it to you by the U.S. Postal Service.
I lived in Boston in 2005.
Yeah.
This is the way it worked.
Yes.
And even then, it was very disruptive compared to Blockbuster.
Yeah, totally. And then, but the founder always had this vision that once the internet infrastructure was able to, that content would be delivered online. And so in 2008. You mentioned, cloud being this huge disruptor, and we really looked at it really for two main things. One was speed; it just allowed you to do things so much more quickly, and then focus. Because if you let sort of your cloud provider handle things like the network and the data center, you can focus on what makes your business unique. So those are really the drivers, and I totally agree in terms of that being an attractor for talent, because folks want to spend their time being creative and working on the things that really excite them and what they specialize in. And in terms of security, our time there, and that was my first role coming into Netflix, was really think about security in the public cloud. And that was really before a cloud security market existed. So we were exploring, what sort of paradigms what sort of models, frameworks did we need to create to be successful? And were we going to be able to just kind of take things that we used to do in the data center in the on-premise world and migrate those to the cloud, or were we going to need to think significantly differently? And I would say it was more of the latter. You really do have to have a mindset shift, because there's so much higher velocity, there's so much more concurrency. And I think above all, to me, the most interesting part of the cloud is that it's self-service, right? The ability to provision infrastructure or data sources is just a click away for anybody. You don't have to ask permission. And that's very freeing and very enabling for the end user. But as you can imagine, for security teams, it's kind of scary, because now anybody can do everything, or anybody can do anything.
The elasticity.
Exactly, elasticity and self-service. So we definitely had to think differently, but it was really enjoyable, because and that's ultimately what engineers want to work on, are difficult problems that haven't been solved yet.
In this sense, there's an inherent tension between security teams and engineers, who, in most cases, they're bound to work together. Like the faith brought them together, yes. Because at the end of the day, the engineers have to fix most of the problems. What kind of culture was created in Netflix, and how did you bridge this kind of two parts of the business house?
Yeah, so really for most of my career, I really focused on the interface between security and engineering. So that's always been like a point of kind of passion and interest for me. And as you mentioned, I would say historically, engineering teams have looked at security teams as kind of, the thing, the team that slows things down. And I would say the Netflix culture is very much around, freedom and allowing people who are good at what they do to sort of do their thing. Our CEO actually wrote a book called No Rules, Rules, right? He's very sort of anti-rules. So I knew coming in as I was building the foundation of a security program that this idea of heavy-handed, the sort of drop the hammer security team, that's very traditional, wasn't going to work. So I really focused my efforts on what are the ways that we could enable engineering teams to move quickly, but still be safe. And one of the analogies I often use, and this goes back to the idea of self-service, is if you've been into a grocery store in the last 10 years, they have this self-checkout line, right, where you can check yourself out, and that certainly allows you to move faster. But there are certain things, like if you want to buy alcohol or you want to buy cigarettes, then you have to engage with a human cashier. So we really like that model where there's sort of the majority of things are safe to kind of do by yourself, and then there's a subset of things that we need to have a little bit higher touch with. So that was almost like the foundational philosophy, is we want to let people do their thing and we want to be able to help them stay safe.
So some would say that you can't share responsibility, and there's the model of the shared responsibility when it comes to security. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can model it correctly, but you have to have. People have to be on board with it. People have to understand their roles. And one of the things that I often say is, like, you can't really make somebody responsible for something that they're either not sort of qualified to do or they don't have the right access to. So when I think about shared responsibility, a lot of times we talk about it with your cloud service provider, but even when you talk about it within an organization, like what is the security team going to do versus, say, what is the engineering team going to do? What I found is that you want to, when you think about the life cycle of security, when you think about identifying systems, when you think about protecting systems, that tends to be best done by the folks that own those systems. So whether it's a data owner, system owner, application owner, because they're closest to the technology, they know the sort of the details. Security teams can't know every technology. They have the principles, whether it's things like defense in depth or automatic updating, but the actual implementation is going to be unique to the particular asset or technology. And then where I would say you want to have security teams focus on, in addition to consulting for that, is you want to have them thinking about detecting threats and responding to issues and sort of building the overall culture around risk.
Yeah. I would describe cloud as the platform which unlocks the potential of data. Utilizing data, creating revenue out of data, understanding data. And in this sense, it's a phenomenal platform. Sentra was created to deal with data. And Sentra is sitting on the crossroad between cloud, security, and data. And in this sense, some of what we're seeing within security establishment is that for some security teams, it's not clear that they have a kind of a basic responsibility for data, because evolution brought them from the on-prem. And when there was on-prem, they were kind of defending the perimeter, yep, the network, the borders. I think the world is changing because of the cloud. How would you define data and security from a security point of view, cybersecurity point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think it's not a coincidence that the sort of rise of the cloud has also led to this explosion in the number of data platforms. Like, you see so much innovation on the data space, whether it's analytics or ML or AI. And to your point, companies recognize, you mentioned Andreessen's quote, but it was, companies recognize that their ability to access and extract value from data is really like key to their ability to, frankly, survive, but certainly compete. So, but yeah, and you know, we had talked previously, and you know, it's amazing how as security teams develop and sort of become more specialized, we see application security teams, we see infrastructure security teams, but relatively infrequently do we see data security teams. And I do agree. I think it's a lot of it when we were in that sort of castle and moat mentality where we were protecting the outside. It's kind of like we didn't really care as much about what was inside as long as we could keep the bad guys out. And of course, that's, as you mentioned, that's not possible with the cloud. So, you know, I think about data and sort of data governance and managing data. It's a very multidimensional problem. You've got security and you've got privacy, you've got legal implications, you've got, you know, you've got to back things up, you've got to be resilient to problems. So I think security has probably always seen themselves as a seat at the table, but the overall ownership of that has been foggy. And I would say that was similar even when I was at Netflix. We had a lot of debates about like who does what, who owns it, who should drive projects around data protection. And I mean, I personally think it's a great chance for security teams to kind of step into that void and assume a leadership position when it comes to protecting data. Because, you know, as we know, a lot of times we talk about the crown jewels and like what are the most important things to protect. And almost always it's some piece of data. It's intellectual property, it's personal data, it's customer data. So.
Because it's so easy to create data and move data and duplicate data, they just have substantial amounts of data that they're not aware of at all. Okay, so it's not just the stuff that you know you have, but in the cloud you have substantial amounts of data, including extremely valuable and sensitive data, which resides there. And I would say most organizations, including security teams, do not know about. And for malicious activity, it's a thriving meadow. And this is kind of a key point from my perspective to kind of find ways to deal with it and to decrease the level of what we call shadow data. We first met just under a year ago. And I remember the first conversation we had. And you said, there's so much mess and so much opportunity. And there's kind of a sense in this industry right now, in the cybersecurity industry, that it's saturated. Indeed, it's fragmented. Can you share this observation of mess and opportunity? And what do you see kind of going in terms of cybersecurity in the next 5 years?
Yeah, and you know, certainly a personal view, but I do believe we're relatively early in terms of our approach to problems and our progress against. I mean, obviously there are many problems, and I guess if I think about maturity as, you know, we talk about in human terms, like, you know, you crawl first and then you walk and then you can run. You know, I would think of us in the security industry, you know, we're just sort of maybe getting off the ground and getting on 2 feet. So still pretty early, lots of interesting problems. And I think that's why, you know, a lot of times you will hear people say, oh, there's so many startups, or there's too many startups. And I would say I disagree, because when there are a lot of unsolved problems, and not just unsolved problems, but very like high impact, like, you know, if you think about ransomware, so many like really significant issues, you have to have a lot of innovation, right? You have to have people that are, you know, throwing out different ideas and testing hypotheses to see what works, because every organization is different, right? If you think about, say, a Netflix, an entertainment company, versus a bank, they have significantly different threat profiles. So you need to be experimenting and testing things out. It doesn't, I mean, of course, that means some folks won't succeed, but I think it's absolutely what we need. So it can be a little bit overwhelming, like from the buyer's perspective, but I think it is needed. And in terms of the next 5 years, I mean, I would imagine you're going to continue to see a lot of innovation in the space as folks are figuring out, because organizations want to capture the value of the cloud, they want to capture the value of data, and as they progress on that journey, you're going to see more and more solutions that can sort of step in and help them along that journey.
Yeah. One more question, Jason. So there's some kind of miscorrelation between enterprises, which have their huge market share and been there for decades, and rely on a lot of IT equipment, which is today legacy equipment. And on-prem is just one angle. It's a major angle of it, but it's one-prem, and they have this huge challenge of transitioning, migrating to the cloud. And at the end of the day, the main thing is to migrate data to the cloud. As we said at the beginning, they don't enjoy much of the innovation, which is absolutely kind of dominant and focusing on the cloud infrastructure. If you'd meet a CEO of this one of those big companies, what would be your advice when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, cloud migration. Yeah, I would say first, if you're one of the really large companies and you've not started cloud migration, it's very late. But reflecting on sort of how we handled it at Netflix, I think when you're migrating data or you're migrating infrastructure to the cloud, the most dangerous time is during the migration, because you have to have operational stability and security in both places. So you have to have all your on-premise stuff protected like it always has been, and then you're sort of moving things and you're learning your way into expertise in the cloud. So that's a very dangerous time. You have to be really, really careful there. So I would say if you can, like, move as quickly as possible. You have to put a lot of time and energy behind it, and so you really want to place your bet on the cloud and sort of get there as quickly as possible, because as you mentioned, that's where good engineers want to be working on modern technology. So the longer you wait, the harder time you're going to have finding talent. The quicker you move, the faster you're going to be able to reap the advantages of being in the cloud.
Thank you.
So Asaf, I know you can't talk a lot in detail about your time in 8200, but if you were going to maybe abstract some findings or learnings that you could share for CISOs or security leaders, what sort of advice would you have?
That's a tough one. If I kind of reduce it into 3 or 4 points, I would say key point is that attack surface is immense, and especially when it comes to legacy equipment, which some of it was not designed at all. Some of these IT infrastructures are 40 plus year old. They were not designed to deal with cyber threats in any way. And in this sense, because you have so many generations of technology with so many vendors in connecting together, it creates a huge attack surface. And in this sense, I would agree totally with the previous point. The transition to the cloud will make your, business-wise, I'm absolutely sure, security-wise, I'm absolutely sure, it will make your life much better, much safer. And transitioning as in kind of a more speedy way than kind of spilling it on 5, 6, 10 years, this is something I will strongly recommend, specifically in order to reduce the attack surface. The second point is the arbitrage between people who know their stuff. I'm talking about manpower in the cybersecurity industry and security teams. So there's a huge arbitrage between what the world needs and what exists.
Yeah.
And as the world is dependent more and more in computation, and every aspect of the world, kind of a physical, energy, electricity, communication, privacy, the ability to create a data transformation effectively, like every aspect relies on computation, and computation doesn't go without cybersecurity. And in this sense, I would recommend organizations to deal a lot with training their people, making sure your workforce is up to date, educating your people. Just don't assume they're kind of on board and they know it. It's extremely complicated. The third point relates to visibility. So from my experience, people underestimate visibility into their environments, and they're kind of obsessed of running and doing things, and there's kind of a culture of, if I don't fix things, I'm not working, I'm not efficient. it's extremely important to understand your environment, to have visibility into your environment. I always give this example of a 787 Dreamliner. Beyond the fact that it's a masterpiece of engineering, and beyond the fact that there's tremendous redundancy, what's unique about this platform is that it has amazing visibility. The amount of sensors you have just in order to understand and look into your environment and give you kind of a signal once something is starting to develop. This is visibility, and I strongly advocate for visibility. And when it comes to data, it's key. Okay, a lot of organizations have substantial amounts of extremely sensitive data they just don't know about. And when they don't know about it, they can't protect it, and there's no security controls, and you can't enforce security, and so on and so forth. And it's a very vicious cycle. So this is kind of, in a nutshell, my observation from the very unique angle I saw while in 8200.
Sure. So you mentioned things like visibility, like education of workforce, and just this massive attack surface. With that attack surface, it sounds like it's a byproduct of legacy and sort of generations of migration. Is there a recommendation you would have there in terms of sort of compressing that attack surface, or at least maybe shining a light on it?
Yeah. First of all, I touched it, moving to leaving obsolete technologies. And the second would be the visibility part. And the third is really to deal more with pre-positioning yourself, assuming that something is going to happen, and playing the if game. Okay, now it happens. Where I'm more exposed, where I'm going to suffer deeper damage, especially when it comes to business impact, whether it's reputation or whether it's revenue. Being able to focus your pre-positioning and deal with these areas before something happens, this will bring you much better into an event. And there's a good chance that you'll be able to kind of pass an event with relatively low damage and continue. So this would be kind of my key tip when it comes to that. And obviously, I touched the workforce part.
Yeah. But I do totally agree in terms of pre-positioning and preparation, because something will happen. Something always happens if you're an organization of any scale. And I think your ability to sort of manage through the incident in sort of an efficient and professional way, and really let the rest of your organization focus on what they do, and let the security team manage through it, really helps. And I think also you have to spend time working with your leadership colleagues to let them understand, because a lot of times you can fall into this trap of thinking, because somebody's in charge of a function, that everything is covered, right? So let's say, okay, well, Jason's in charge of security, so we're secure, we're not going to have any problems. But of course, that's not the case. So really helping them understand the realities of where we are as an industry, and sort of where the exposure is and what could happen, so that they're not expecting completely, calm waters. Every once in a while, there will be some waves, but we'll make it through.
Yeah. I want to add to that, and I totally agree with you, that I think a key fundamental feature for security teams is being able to talk about facts, about concrete, evidential problem, and moving from kind of the guess area and the intuition area. And this is where visibility is a key part, and it's crucial when it comes to data. It's crucial when it comes to data, because the ability to pinpoint where your key assets are is in this sense is not something you can kind of feel about. You have to say, listen, I have here my entire source code is exposed. Okay, I have lost encryption keys. They're there. Okay, customer related information, whether it's PII, PCI, any form of that. It's not in the right place. Okay. It's not according to the policy we agreed. And just being able to come and show it, in many cases, this is the most effective way to educate your workforce and to bridge to the areas in the organization which have to fix it. Because it's again, no one wants, when they see a problem, and it's a substantial problem, they want to fix it. It's much easier for you to educate them and convince them. And in this sense, this is an extra tip I would give to security teams.
Yeah, make sure you can demonstrate the problem and provide evidence first. Sure.
And kind of not wave your hands and kind of just...
Yeah.
So cloud has opened opportunities to security teams. And historically, security teams are kind of, their main core mission is to reduce risk and to prevent bad things happening in terms of cyber threats. And I would ask you in this sense, how much, and it's also, there's a misconception about security teams slowing their organizations and you know, making everything more complicated, more bureaucratic and less nimble and fast. From what's your perception about the new opportunities of security teams to actually enable the organization to move faster, to donate more to the revenue side?
Yeah, I think personally, I think security teams are excited by it because to your point, I think historically security teams have felt a little bit sort of tucked away, and yeah, we need them, but you know, they don't really add a lot of value. Whereas now they can really find themselves stepping in to help make things faster. And that was, I would say, kind of core to what our approach was. We had this idea of, if you think about road safety, you know, we had this idea of guardrails, right? Where guardrails on a highway, they allow you to go fast, but stay safe. Whereas the old way of security was really designed around gates, right? You'd go to the gate, you'd stop, somebody would sort of take a look and decide if you could keep moving. Yeah.
That's a smart analogy. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and and I think, you know, when sort of teams are aligned around that, saying, because I think they do recognize, well, the business is moving to the cloud. They want this access to data because they want to be competitive and they want to make the company successful. And security teams want to be part of that as well. And now they really have a great chance to with the cloud.
Yeah. So, as we said, so much mess, but indeed amazing opportunity. And thank you, Jason, for your kind of profound insights and the time here with us in Israel. And I wish you safe travels back to the US. And,
Thank you.
And the flight's going to be safe. So
yes.
Yeah. No, I wish that cybersecurity will make these milestones like the aviation industry did from the early days. It's a much more complex mission. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Asaf.
Yeah.